Welcome to Conversations with STEM, the channel that helps you talk and learn with your children about science, technology, engineering, and math. In this video, we will be carrying out an investigation in order to explore the properties of matter. Matter is defined as anything that has mass or contains stuff and has volume or takes up space. Different kinds of matter have different properties or characteristics. Our focus for the video will be making observations or collecting data about the liquid shown and discussing how the investigation is structured. Your child may note that some of the liquids are thicker than others, or that they are different colors. If they're familiar with the substances, they may recall that oil is slippery and honey is sticky. These are all examples of properties. Ask your child what would happen if the substances were poured into the same glass and let them predict the results. Once they have a prediction, discuss whether the way in which the liquids are poured together would make a difference. Does the order in which the liquids are poured matter? Does the speed of the pour matter? Does the way the liquids are poured into the glass matter? In an investigation, all of these questions are variables. A variable is any part of an experiment that can be changed. It's important to consider all the variables in an investigation before carrying it out because changing a variable can sometimes change the entire outcome of an experiment. It's also important to know that not every variable can be controlled. Determining the important variables as well as the controllable variables gives us a better understanding about the reliability of our investigation's data. Discuss with your child how the investigation was carried out as they make observations about how the water and honey were poured together. They may note that the water was poured down the side of the glass. If they do, reference your earlier discussion about the variables in the experiment and ask if it would make a difference if the water was poured directly into the honey. Discuss the outcome of the experiment. Where did the water go? Make sure your child is observing that the water is sitting on top of the honey and not mixing in with it. Let's go back to the discussion of the experimental procedure. Ask your child what they think should be done with the oil. How should it be added to the cup of water and honey? Should it be poured the same way or differently? This is a great moment to bring up the need for consistency when carrying out an investigation. If the oil is poured in differently from the water, would that be a good experiment? Have your child make observations about how the oil is added to the cup. Was the experiment the same or different? If they noted differences, discuss whether they think the differences might have changed the outcome of the investigations. For example, the cup was tilted to the opposite side. Does that matter? Another property of matter is density. If your child hasn't begun to study the concept of density, keep the focus on the properties of the liquids and how the investigation in the video is being carried out. If your child understands that matter is made up of atoms, you might choose to discuss this scientific property at this point. Density is the relationship between mass and volume. The stuff inside any kind of matter is atoms. The more stuff a substance has in a given amount of space, or the closer the atoms of a substance are to each other, the more dense the substance is. You could think about density like taking your suitcase on vacation. It only has a certain amount of space inside it, which you filled with stuff, such as clothes and shoes. When you came back from vacation, you probably stuffed some souvenirs inside it as well, and had to squish your clothes more closely together to fit the new things you bought. The space inside your suitcase didn't change, but you put more stuff inside it. Your suitcase is now more dense. In our cup, the honey had the most closely packed atoms and was the densest of the three liquids and stayed at the bottom. The oil had the most space between its atoms of the three liquids and rose to the top, being the least dense. Pause the video after observing the column of liquids and discuss what else could be added to this investigation. Based on their observations about the experiment and its results, what else could be done? Focus this conversation on what they would gain from their idea. What new information would they discover if they added their idea to the experiment? They might be interested in adding more liquids and observing how the new liquids might behave, or perhaps they want to change how the experiment was performed and pour the liquids into the center of the cup to see if that changes the results. When we plan an investigation, there always needs to be a reason why we want to do that experiment. This is different from the traditional hypothesis in which the learner writes a formal explanation about the supposed outcome of an experiment. We don't need to have a complete understanding of what will happen in order to do an experiment. We do need to have a frame of understanding why we're choosing to do this particular experiment. Planning an investigation exposes our thinking about a concept. What do we think might happen? Why is this a good question to ask and test? What data are we collecting that will help answer our questions? And sometimes it's a perfectly fine answer to say, I have absolutely no idea what will happen, so let's try it and see. Just make sure an adult knows there won't be any significant adverse reactions before performing that experiment. Ask your child what would happen if a solid object was added to the cup. Have them consider if it would sink to the bottom, and discuss their thinking with them. Pause the video after each object is shown and have them predict what will happen when the object is added to the cup, and then discuss where each object went after they watch it being added. Why didn't all the solid objects sink to the bottom of the cup? Again, if your child doesn't yet understand that matter is made up of atoms, keep this conversation to the properties of matter. Solids, liquids, and gases all have unique characteristics that make them different from other types of matter. If your child is able to discuss density, have them consider whether solid objects could also have different densities. There is evidence in this experiment that supports the understanding that solids do have different densities. Because they fell to different levels of the density column, it means that they're suspended in the liquid that most closely matches how close together their atoms are within the volume the object takes up. I hope this video helps you have conversations with your child while planning and carrying out investigations. If you want to continue this conversation, visit the Conversations with STEM website in the description box below. to analyze data while you construct a density column with saltwater. Leave a comment down below and tell us how the conversation with your child went, and visit our forum for questions and discussions about scientific conversations. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.